This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun beating Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Monday morning. Technical difficulties. You're not going to beat us. Overcoming, getting stronger. It's what it's all about as August 2022 kicks off. Welcome in. Thanks for being a part of the show. Sorry for a few-minute delay there. Technical difficulties. They happen. You guys all know it. Dealing with computers. That's how it works. Big weekend for Gamecock football recruiting. Cracking the top 25 now in the national recruiting ranking. That's where we are, and that's where we begin. But not just there. We'll get to a bunch of those details coming up in just a minute. First, bigger headlines or maybe equally notable, just slightly less notable might be the best way to put that. Deebo Samuel, 3 years, $73.5 million with more than 58 of that guaranteed. DK Metcalf kind of set the bar in the NFL. Before this year, it was only Duke Hopkins with more than a $24 million guarantee, I think, out there for wide receiver money, and now 7 other wide receivers have joined him. So tremendous timing for Deebo Samuel to have the tremendous season that he did last year. Only receiver in the league, or maybe the only receiver ever to go 1,400 receiving yards and 300 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns. I think that might have been the most ever by a receiver. Incredible. What he averaged, 18.1 yards per catch or something nuts. So Deebo Samuel, the drama, the off-season drama for him seems to have now subsided or seems to have paid off in a big way with $58 million guaranteed moving forward and a 3-year extension with the San Francisco 49ers. But clearly he has thrived in the last couple of years. He has made the offense go, and now that they're moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance, he had a lot of leverage, let's put it that way, and he used it, and it pays off right as training camp really gets going. First full week this week. Gamecock preseason practice gets going on Friday. More NFL/South Carolina news this morning. The Deshaun Watson ruling is expected. 9 a.m. is what I've heard. We'll have Cleveland Browns fanatic Stuart Lake on with us about 8:30 this morning, so he'll be keeping an eye on that. The instant reaction coming from him as well. Really interested to see what comes down in this. I saw 3 other lawsuits, I think, settled over the weekend, and I don't even know what the number is up to, somewhere around 30, I think, or something like that. And all the testimony and the legal briefs from one side or the other from this judge who is going to make the ruling, and the NFL Players Association I saw releasing a statement last night. Whatever the ruling is going to be, they're going to be behind it. The NFL is pushing for kind of a 1-year indefinite suspension that I've seen. So we'll get news on that here coming up in just a little bit. Glad you guys are with us. See DC in first this morning. Jason, Hope, happy August to you as well. Anthony with a good morning UFAs. Toaster with a good morning as well. Glad you guys are all a part of the program. And from the Gamecock perspective, I guess as we were talking about it on Friday, we knew a big recruiting weekend was on tap. And that's where we are in the calendar. Certainly not just for the University of South Carolina, but for South Carolina specifically, being in year 2 with a new coach, having won a combined 6 games in the last 2 years of the Will Muschamp era, and then winning 7 games in year number 1. An ideal time to capitalize on positive momentum and make some big splashes in recruit. And that's what happened over the weekend. Not exactly, I don't think, how Gamecock fans, the most optimistic version of the weekend. As I understand it, and again, not a recruiting guy 365 days a year, but 4 4-stars in over the weekend, or the chance on Friday to close 4 4-star guys. You have a wide receiver from up in Roanoke, Virginia, in Carmelo Taylor. You have a big offensive lineman from up in Matha, where Marshawn Lloyd played, right outside of D.C., and he just goes by Tree, and that's what we're going to call him. The actual name is, I put his name up there. So those decisions were supposed to, on Friday morning, supposed to come this weekend, and then both those guys have pushed their official word back, the official announcement back. So those 2 4-star guys have yet to sign. And I think the prevailing thought is that the Gamecocks are in a good position for both of those guys. But Carolina did get, and this started first with Central defensive end Monteith Rain, the 4-star guy, an edge rusher that Carolina's recent recruiting classes have lacked, and being a hometown kind of guy, something not far away, Gamecock City and the whole thing, a big pickup to really get things rolling for the weekend for Gamecock football. And then it was yesterday up in Spartanburg, Dorman offensive lineman Marquis Anderson. Really impressive when you read this. This is the thing that stands out with him. The highest rated offensive lineman, second highest ever in Gamecock history from a recruiting standpoint. Brandon Shell, the only other guy with better or more recruiting height from an offensive line standpoint. Marquis Anderson. Also, the way that he did it, his dad had the food truck there, the grilling 365 and seafood, I think is what it's called up there. 365 grilling and seafood truck. And so he came up with the idea, hey, you're an offensive lineman. What goes with offensive lineman? Pancake block, put syrup bottles out there. And the fact that the syrup bottle that Marquis Anderson chose yesterday was the one with the Gamecock logo on it instead of the Clemson logo, the LSU logo for North Carolina. Couldn't get much better than that in football recruiting. The big time pickup there. Other recruiting notes over the weekend, another offensive lineman committing to Carolina. This Latavius Shivers from the state of Georgia, up to a 3-star guy, as opposed to the big-time 4-star prospect that Anderson was. And then I think the first actual commit of the weekend was a class 2024 guy, second commit for that class, so not this upcoming recruiting cycle, but the next one, and an Ohio defensive back, Carson Hop. And also one decommitment from the weekend as well from the Gamecock recruiting class for this year. Florida defensive back Cameron Upshaw announced that he was Cameron Upshaw ended up decommitting from the class. I think still has South Carolina in the mix. I saw him still tweeting about the Gamecocks over the weekend as well, but just uncomfortable, I guess, with how that was working out. He does not seem to be a guy. Arkansas was the only other major offer that I saw in the mix for Cameron Upshaw. So sometimes that can be on both sides, right? A little bit. Say, hey, you might want to think about opening things up with all these things that are falling out. I don't know. I don't have the inside information there. And I know that's not necessarily public either, but one guy out.
Several guys in, and a couple more guys still on the way with Taylor, the big offensive lineman from DeMatha. Those decisions expected, I think, this week from what I've been reading, and the Gamecocks still thought to be in good shape there, but all the way up to number 22 in the On3 national rankings is where I saw Carolina. So the climb has continued. 15 guys committed total. So that does kind of go hand in hand. I know Florida also had a recent influx. They're up to 16 guys committed, but 13 of those now 4-star guys. So Billy Napier making a big push. They're up to 13. Tennessee's at 11. The Gamecocks, I think, 7th in the SEC, even though number 22 in the country with programs. Let's see, Texas A&M's at 17, Arkansas is at 16 in the country. Florida, Tennessee, I mentioned LSU ahead of them. Clemson at number 7 in the country. Georgia at 3, Alabama at 1, just to give you an idea. And then Texas is at 5, Oklahoma is at 10, if we're going big picture SEC stuff down the line. So, what are you thinking? DC says the staff has a different feel to it compared to anything in the Muschamp era. I feel more confident that they can get back to being good to great. I hope they can hold on to these kids. That's another reason why I brought up Billy Napier. The word is Florida putting the big time press on some Gamecock commits from the state of Florida. Pup Howard being the most notable one that I saw, the linebacker from Jacksonville. So they are going to have to hold on to these guys for sure. Roger weighing in as well. Good morning to you, Roger. Saw part of the weekend's festivities. So in a big cookout, they had the bounce houses. I don't think you call that, right? Bounce like water slide deal going for the players. This is kind of the final few days before camp really gets going, and to wrap up one portion of the summer program. Had that going down. I saw wide receivers coach Justin Stepp videoing and showing, I think it was a Carry-On Joyner, or maybe it was Josh Van, I think, goes down head first. And he's like, hey, how about we not do the head first slide? And then the next one he puts up is to Carry-On Joyner going head first backwards. Like, clearly those guys listen. Justin Stepp was making fun of himself, self-deprecating there, and they kind of listen how my kids listen, I think, around the house. But another video I saw over the weekend in Williams-Brice Stadium, coaches taking a picture, coaches and staff, I think, taking a picture right there at the tunnel where you come out for 2001. And I think some of the players in town up top, that new seating area right over 2001, and they were taking the picture. And I think that also coincided with some water balloonage going down on the coaches. So good times for Gamecock football, I think, over the weekend by and large. You never know how these things are going to turn out eventually. You always get the instant feedback, and I think there's probably 14 SEC programs that say, yeah, great weekend. Great recruiting weekend. You see, guys, see who ended up signing with us? Well, you never know how that works out, right? But momentum is a thing for sure. Gamecock football has positive momentum right now, and especially compared to what it has been in previous years. I think notable. And the really notable one, so if you follow SEC football at all, you know you got to have an offensive line. And Marquis Anderson, first of all, in-state. I should say, first of all, really good player, thought to be, right? If you look at these recruiting rankings, a lot of times they're 2-100 by some services, 1-100, or they're the decimal point, like 1.00 would be a 100% ranking. So a 0.94 I've seen for Marquis Anderson, or 94 out of 100. That's pretty good. That's pretty strong. I think maybe you got to get to 95 to be a 5-star guy. Thought to be a 5-star guy. Again, not a recruiting nerd, but really good player, in-state guy from Dorman. And then you beat out Clemson, LSU, North Carolina. Got to have really good players. You especially got to have them on the offensive line. I think another reason why Gamecock fans have some logical optimism, if that makes any sense. Optimistic with good reasons to back that up for the 2022 season, knowing all the experience that is coming back on the offensive line. Hasn't been a dominant offensive line by any stretch of the imagination. They've had some good games. They have talent up there. They have a bunch of starters back. They have all the starters back, basically, besides the junior college transfer Jazz Turnentine, who was not really a starter towards the end of the season. Then they have those backups back, and the depth just continues for Carolina on the offensive line. You get a guy like this, you pair him possibly with the big offensive lineman up at DeMatha High School who's set to make his announcement in the coming days. You had a guy from up in Pennsylvania, Brubaker, who's supposed to be a big-time offensive lineman, a swimmer who is a true freshman going into this year. Depth, quality depth, what you got to have in the SEC, especially on the offensive line that has been a big-time issue at South Carolina and pretty much any program that is not one of the best in college football. So you get that on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, you get a guy who can get after the quarterback, presumably an in-state guy over at Sumter in Monteque Rames as well. A guy that you really haven't had in the previous couple of recruiting classes. So those are the two that stand out from the weekend for sure. And they stand out not just because they're good players, but because they're at very important positions. You can't have a big-time college football program without big-time guys getting after the passer and big-time guys protecting the passer. And Carolina's certainly hoping that these guys continue along the path they are on right now and live up to where they're projected to be in four-star guys and really good players and doing it in-state as well. This is the recipe that we've seen before, right? Shane Beamer has had a big part of this recipe back in his assistant coaching days where he was the recruiting coordinator, and Carolina did have the state of South Carolina locked down pretty well. And that set the foundation for the Steve Spurrier glory years of an SEC East Division championship in 2010, and then 3 straight top 10 finishes after that. Oh, yeah, Adam. I'm not a big wrestling fan, but you know who is? Stuart Lake is a big wrestling fan. So we're going to get plenty of wrestling talk here. We'll get Stu's wrestling weekend recap coming up. And yeah, Ric Flair went out with a win last night. Of course he did. Did you ever think that was in doubt? His last match, right? Of course that's how that was going to end up. I would think. I'd be messed up otherwise. Send him out just embarrassed. A legend. We'll get Stuart's much more qualified opinions in on wrestling coming up. Troy, resident Clemson fan. I think Beamer was a good hire, but South Carolina fans were pretty excited after years 1 and 2 of Muschamp. Also, it's true. No doubt. That first year, winning 6 games in the regular season, coming off the disastrous ending of Steve Spurrier quitting midseason and then Sean Elliott taking over as the interim coach and only beating Vanderbilt, losing to Citadel that year. Yeah, that was a tremendous coaching job by Will Muschamp. Year 2, going and winning at the Outback Bowl, winning 9 games. There were reasons for Gamecock fans to be logically optimistic. There was building in recruiting, and that was Will Muschamp's reputation as well. What there wasn't was an offensive coordinator who had proven himself under their head coach to move the football. Very similar type of environment. But what you didn't have was a guy who was favored to win the Heisman Trophy transferring in to be your quarterback. What you didn't have was a guy running your program who is doing it for the first time as a head coach and really not just getting some results on the field and getting some recruits in, but connecting with the fan base unlike a head coach has ever connected before. So those are a couple of differences. Also, the Muschamp failed experiment at Florida was reality still at that point. And hope comes back. Troy, there's definitely a difference in Muschamp and Beamer. Anyone can see that. I'm excited, but I'm taking it one game at a time, seeing how this thing goes. Well done. Troy says he loves Ric Flair, and that's a perfect time to bring in our first guest today. This is the earliest wrestling has ever been mentioned on the show, and Stuart Lake is all smiles over there. Look, I'm glad to see you survive the weekend, sir. What do you think? 1 through 10, where do you rate the wrestling weekend this week, especially with all your history with wrestling, sir?
Yeah, it was a big weekend with SummerSlam and then the Ric Flair match last night. I mean, it was a Super Bowl of wrestling weekends, to be honest with you here. And to be July 31st. So hate to use a Super Bowl term already.
You seem worn out, man. Did it whip you? How late was this thing last? How late was the Flair match last night? You just waking up?
Yeah, no, the Flair match was exhausting I had a friend of mine help me get a little bootleg version of it, so I was able to watch it, but it was not really something fun to watch in that sense. I hated seeing that a career that we've all enjoyed kind of end the way it did with that, but thank God he survived. There were moments I was turning it off and then turning it back on to make sure he had survived. I didn't want to watch it live. But
no, tell me, who did Ric Flair even wrestle? I have no idea.
Gosh, I didn't even know all their names. This guy Jeff Jarrett, who all old wrestling fans know, was a part of it. It was his son-in-law, which is Charlotte Flair's husband, was his tag partner. So it was more of a slow tag team match than just a one-on-one match.
Okay.
But of course, he cut himself at some point in it, so it turned ugly there towards the end. But no, it was just a cool on Saturday, though. The SummerSlam was fun. As you know, I kind of joked with you last week that Triple H is now running the WWE, so you could see it a lot more fun than SummerSlam, but a big grand finale there with Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. So it was fun to watch.
Now, did I see the ring get tossed upside down by some sort of construction equipment and the whole thing? Did that happen this weekend? I saw something on social media. What was going on there?
Well, Brock Lesnar came in on a tractor with a lift. So at one point he ended up getting back on it, lifting the ring up. So it was obviously a no disqualification match. Was the only way you can do stuff like that. So it was it was used in that. You don't see that very often. It's reminding me a lot of the old wrestling days.
How did they move on from there? Did the ring ever get back? Was that the end? What happened from that?
No, the ring remained in the air. And then later on, he was jumped by the Usos. It was more of a 3-on-1 type finale to it, where they stacked all kind of stuff on Brock Lesnar so that he couldn't get back up. It's one of those, Tim, you really need to see it to believe it.
Sounds like it.
Yes.
Were you a Ric Flair guy, by the way?
Yeah, it was. I mean, all of that era when they used to travel around and they would come to the middle school gyms and all that. He was always just a, bigger than life guy to us back then, but was always such a good guy when you did get to run across him. So, yeah, I've always been a Ric Flair guy, no doubt.
DC asked, did he have the old Kool-Aid cherry powder in his hair so when he sweats, he bleeds?
Yeah, it was – I think he was really bleeding in this one more than we needed for the finale. But, yeah, it looked like an old school match for sure.
All right. Fantastic. So you feel good? As I asked the 1 through 10, I never even got a number from you. What sounds like a 7-ish to me, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I'm a high 7, probably 8 for the whole weekend. It was fun. It was just stuff to kind of set the mood. Obviously, not WrestleMania type, but it was very close. They were in the Titan Stadium and reported like almost 50,000 people there. So it was kind of cool post-COVID to just see something normal, going on again and that type stuff.
What's the biggest wrestling crowd you've ever been a part of?
I've never been any bigger than here. I've always said that one day I do want to do a WrestleMania, and I've had a bunch of my old former players have gone to WrestleManias, different things, and they'll text me. But the biggest one I've been is, here in the Coliseum or something like that.
Okay, so 10-ish, somewhere in there. Did they get 10 in that Coliseum back in the day, somewhere like that?
Yeah, I was at North Charleston Coliseum back in the 90s when the WWF first came to really South, and it was their first show in South Carolina. So all my teammates and I, we made it to it. So it was probably 10 or 11,000 at that one.
I can only imagine the energy in the building with those things.
Yeah.
Stuart Lake, former Gamecock baseball assistant coach, Charleston Southern head coach, Ole Miss assistant, College of Charleston assistant. You had the great story about the Georgia heckling not too long ago, right? From your College of Charleston days. All right, so a big story for Gamecock fans today is Carolina cracking the top 25 in the national recruiting rankings from a football standpoint, right? You got a big recruiting weekend over the last few days. You get a couple of guys to commit. You get a couple of more who are kind of expected to or on the precipice of committing. You've been a guy that's been part of recruiting for a long, long time. How do you look at the outside narrative of this stuff at this point, especially as it pertains to football, because that recruiting operation is a completely different kind of level than the baseball with 11.7 scholarships and everything you got to deal with from a baseball standpoint?
Yeah, well, as a Gamecock fan watching right now, it's just exciting to see a head coach that seems to be so involved. We all enjoyed Coach Spurrier's era, Coach Holtz's too, as a success. With Coach Muschamp, you never felt like he was as involved as what we're seeing now. So I'm super excited. I'm also excited to see, I've always said I'm a South Carolina guy, so I love seeing our in-state players who have the talent to help you win, wanting to stay in the state. And obviously I want them to stay as a Gamecock, not as a Tiger. So super excited as I followed it this weekend as well.
So what would you rather, if you had to choose, you get offensive lineman or defensive end, which one you taking from a big-time football player standpoint?
Well, I mean, I look at our teams that are so successful here, and I just remember our defensive linemen. From when our era, it just seemed like we dominated on that defensive front. But you and I both know if the quarterback's getting knocked down more than he's getting a throw off, then offensive linemen become very important. So I always hate to say one more than the other, but boy, I'm a defensive minded guy. So I sure love when you get those defensive ends.
Yeah, I think you can scheme around the offensive line a lot more than you can scheme around not having guys on the defensive end. And I don't know if we talk about it enough. Those 3 top 10 finishing teams, and then the defensive or the SEC East championship the year before, the defensive names from those teams, crazy, right? You look at that 2010 game against Alabama, and they pop up the defensive starting lineup for South Carolina, and it's like all of those dudes almost. I think outside of like the 2 maybe JUCO transfer linebackers played in the NFL. And not just play, they made a bunch of money in the NFL. And that was before Clowney came. That was the year before Jadeveon Clowney came. And then you saw what Clowney, the massive effect that he could have on a game, not even from a statistical standpoint, but just being on one side and what teams had to do. No Jadeveon Clowney for the Gamecocks yet for Shane Beamer, no doubt about it. That was a different kind of deal, but in momentum for sure. And you being a Gamecock guy, you mentioned, can you sum up the difference right now in the feel around Shane Beamer than what has been in years past?
I think it's just the whole last few years, just for what we've all gone through of not getting to have a full stadium. And now you feel like this will be the first really year in the last 3 where football season's starting out, you're not watching it and everyone's wearing masks and having to still think about, even last year in the NFL, there were still guys sitting out with COVID. Seemed like the college game handled it better even than the NFL last year. So I think it's just really a case, and I speak for myself, where we just want to be normal again. And you feel like from the excitement that you get when you watch them or you're around the program in whatever ways you can, that this could be a fun year. I'm not saying a 10-win or any of those type years, you just feel like it's going to be a team that'll compete and it'll be a fun season to really watch them, is the vibe that you get from them right now.
I think that's so underrated, right? Just I don't think South Carolina fans, obviously they're not demanding of championships every single year and the whole thing, but when the program, when it's not fun to watch your program, that's just a sad place to be. And unfortunately, that's where it got in the Will Muschamp era. It never got there in the Steve Spurrier era, right? If you had Spurrier on your sideline, it was going to be fun, right? Yeah. It might not turn out great. In the end, obviously wasn't great either, but it was notable. And there's still plenty of people interested. That was the unfortunate part of the Will Muschamp ending in a lot of ways. So, Stuart, I'm also seeing the big NFL news. We'll get to Deebo Samuel's news yesterday. The big NFL news today is Deshaun Watson and the ruling and the whole thing. Have you seen it yet? I just saw a report. You?
Well, I haven't. I've kind of, as you were saying it, I've been trying to flip to my phone and keep my attention, obviously, on what you were saying. But what did you get? Because I hadn't flipped it on.
What would you guess? What would you guess? Let's hear your guess before I give you the word. Oh, don't cheat. Don't cheat on me and see
No,
it.
I wasn't. I've been thinking 8 games, kind of from everything I'd read.
Gotcha. What I'm reading right now, Adam Schefter from ESPN, who always seems to break this news by and large in the NFL, is saying that the federal judge is ruling that he did violate the conduct policy and has suspended him 6 games.
Okay.
So from the Cleveland Browns standpoint, you'll take that when you had the 8 games out there, or the worst case scenario was a full year. And I think that's what the NFL was pushing for. I didn't think that was going to happen, having this dragged out as long as it did, and what happened, him not even playing last year. 6 games seems, I guess if I had to guess, we probably should have done that beforehand. I probably would have guessed 4. I thought it was going to be even less, but now you got the happy medium there, probably not the right way to put that, but in between 4 and 8, and you get 6.
Yeah, I try to think back. What did Tom Brady get with Deflategate? Was that 4 or 6?
That was 4.
Yeah, because I mean, even that year he came back. The 5th game, of course, was against the Browns. So kind of our luck that we got him in his first week. So I couldn't remember which one it was, but I just thought it was interesting yesterday where the Players Association was trying to get the league to come on board to say neither one of us will appeal what comes down, because I think it is time, and whatever, we obviously will never know all the details and don't want to know a lot of them probably, but it was a time that we need to move on. And it'll be interesting now to see if the league is fine, if that's what it turns out to be 6, and just start letting someone put this behind them and move on. But as a Browns fan, yeah, excited. I don't know who will start those 6 games for us. As quarterback, got some big games. Obviously, the open the year at the Panthers now with Baker Mayfield, I think he'll probably be the starter, even though right now I think he's kind of still in that 2 role there. But, some big games early on. But it would just be nice to me and you sit here and talk Browns football and not have to talk legal actions and make sure what we're saying in that sense. So hopefully this can be a verdict and it's fair to everyone and they get to move on and play football.
If this had just been a 6-game deal, because I think in my head, and I don't know how you can see it differently, like this is basically last season plus 6 games.
Yes.
I get it. He got paid last season, I think, too. So if you're one of those who's going to stand up and say this is absolutely unfair and Ray Rice should be the same kind of situation, I guess I get that. But I think those of us who come at it from a reasonable standpoint also can see the other side of it and how it is just, it's awful. It's an awful situation. There's no doubt about it. And your buddy Scott Eisberg came on. He's like, I can never pull for Deshaun Watson, and he's always going to be that guy to me, and he's completely he's kind of dead to me kind of thing. I get that, but from the reasonable side of it as well, the old you're innocent until proven guilty type deal. And in this, as I read how this thing went down with the federal judge, there was I guess a lot of argument to be made on his side when it comes to this. It's just like you mentioned, it's an awful thing to talk about, an awful thing that happened, and now there is at least resolution moving forward. I think the fact that it went unresolved for as long as it did might have kind of fed into just the terrible situation. And I think maybe almost everybody, I get that they're 30 or plus. I don't know how many women were involved in it at this point. You never want to sweep that under the rug and say, now let's just move on and everybody can talk about football. But from a sports fan standpoint, that certainly is kind of where I think most of us are, that finally we've gotten to this point. I don't know if we've ever seen anything quite like this, man.
No, I agree. It's I didn't think that, and especially 2 or 3 years ago, I thought Baker Mayfield was going to be that guy. Came in that Monday night, and finally we win a game, and we get it going. You're finally 500. Then we win playoff games. 2 years ago, beating Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh in a playoff game. So, I had kind of hoped he would be the guy, to be honest. But again, as you and I know, we never get all the facts if we're not there. So I'm not sure what happened in Cleveland that all of a sudden Baker Mayfield became expendable as quick as he did. And then with Deshaun Watson, if he hadn't been a Clemson guy, I don't know if I'd have known much about the situation, but we had paid attention because of the Clemson connection. And then for him to become a Brown kind of caught me off guard. But just as as I joke a lot, people ask me, why do you like wrestling? Well, there's nothing about wrestling that reminds me of real life. I've never been one of those that wanted to watch real life TV and it reminds you of real life. I get enough real life. It's fun to watch Saturday night and see a ring getting lifted by a tractor. Well, that's not part of my normal life, so I can laugh, enjoy it, and move on. Well, that's what the NFL's always been for me. A chance to just get away for that 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever. As a Browns fan, it's been hard at times, but I don't want that to be the real life for me. So it's hard when the real life is brought into a sport, although it's brought in a lot now. But I'm also a person that I realize I don't know all the facts. So I just can't be maybe as hard as Scotty is on anyone when I wasn't invited into the courtroom or those hearings. So I'm just going to kind of go with what the league does and focus on the football and not be the legal aspect of it for me. I just want to see the Browns win and enjoy games on Sundays and Monday Night Football and those type things.
It's an interesting way to put it. I never thought about that from the sports fan perspective. But it makes sense. That makes sense to go there to wrestling. Troy says he went to the Great American Bash back in '85 at Charlotte Outdoor Stadium when it was time for Rick's match. There was no sign of Flair. And then 2001 started. He came into the stadium in a helicopter. Strong. You remember that one?
I remember. Well, that was back in the day where you had to watch it on the weekends. So we watched it every Saturday and Sunday, and I do remember seeing that. That was probably against Dusty Rhodes, if I had a guess, in about that 1985 era. But I do remember that. That's pretty cool.
DC also weighing in says, I need to send a Muschamp a bill for a new living room set. I think I went through 2 or 3 recliners. Does that mean you tore them up or you just fell asleep in them, DC? I'm not quite sure. I thought he was going to say he took out a couple of television sets, and I think he would not be alone in that one. And also we know with what Will Muschamp got bought out for that he might be able to spring for a living room set or 2. All right, so you got the Deshaun Watson news today. And again, Adam Schefter reporting it's going to be 6 games. Previously, the Browns had come out, or the Players Association had come out and said, yep, we're not going to appeal it. And I think on the other side as well. So I think that was kind of a concerted PR effort, like, hey, let's move on from this. Whatever it is, going to go with it. And then now it can be a lot more training camp news and the typical NFL discussion this time of year. And the Browns can formulate their plan, right? Jacoby Brissett probably going to be the guy. Josh Rosen, I guess, has a chance to get in there and take some snaps or at least be an emergency type guy. Will be fascinating to see how that first game plays out for sure, knowing that it's against the Carolina Panthers, knowing that I follow Joe Person, who used to cover the Gamecocks and now covers the Panthers, follow him on Twitter, and those guys' jobs right now, the beat writers for NFL teams, are to send us updates from every single play in camp almost. I'm saying, oh, no, Baker Mayfield threw an interception. He's not going to be the guy. Oh, look at Sam Darnold's numbers in the red zone today and the whole thing. I don't know where that's going to go. Stu, I'd be surprised if Baker Mayfield's not the guy for the Panthers. To start at least. I'm not saying it's going to go great, but I find it hard to believe that Sam Darnold is going to be able to beat him out. If he is, I don't know what that says about Baker's career moving forward.
Yeah, me either. I would have to think Mayfield. I know I love watching how they keep telling us Matt Corral's the first guy to practice every day for the Panthers. So if that means something, I guess he's got a chance. And I think he probably in the future may. But Mayfield played last year with some injuries that probably didn't need to play with. And I think definitely affected him after he got hurt making a tackle in the game. But you got to think, even the NFL's got to hope that he's your opening day starter before they can get the Browns, Panthers with Baker Mayfield starting and Cleveland basically starting whoever. So, I mean, that storyline is set up for him to be the guy. And if he's healthy, again, like you said, I can't believe he's not the guy if he's healthy. And if he's not, then he may need to look back into some more commercials and that type stuff, because that's not good for his career if he's not beating those guys out yet.
No doubt about it. And it might be the best thing possible if you get some sort of combination of Mayfield and Darnold for first half of the season, and then Matt Corral could be the guy. I mean, he doesn't have the baggage that those two guys have at this point, and maybe he can be a big-time NFL guy. I certainly saw a massive progression in college. We kind of saw one of his first major games when he came in for an injury against South Carolina in the fourth quarter and was completely overwhelmed, and Carolina ended up winning that game in Oxford that day several years ago. And then, man, he's been fun to watch the last few games. You figured he would be, and Lane Kiffin would have a major impact there, and he seemed to be a really good fit with Kiffin, but I got no clue if he can do it in the NFL. And I think that's the honest assessment for a lot of quarterbacks, right? Good college players flip a coin whether they're going to be able to play in the NFL, and then flip a coin to see how long they'll be able to sustain it, like Baker Mayfield, right? We thought he was playing in the NFL, and then apparently the Browns found something out that it just wasn't working, and now he's kind of fighting for his career.
Yeah, it's got to be just as scouts and the way they do everything, it's hard to pick quarterbacks. I think what Lane Kiffin did for Corral is what he does for so many players. He gives them extreme confidence in themselves, and they may play above their talent with their confidence. I don't think in NFL that you can do that. And that's where the Tom Brady's and the guys that have been so successful are just the show up every day. And you know, you look at Peyton Manning, he was never flashy, but just a tremendous career because he always seemed more prepared than the most of the people he was playing. So I don't know. I don't know enough about Corral. I do know with Baker Mayfield, I think he's a guy he's got a lot to prove. So you rarely get second chances in professional sports. And I feel like he got a second chance in an organization where he didn't come in to be the backup. He came in with a chance to be the starter again. And to be honest, I'm pulling for him. I don't know what happened in Cleveland. I thought he was going to be the guy for the next few years. He's not. But I'm still pulling for him. He's always been that underdog that achieves. So I enjoy those guys.
Well, chip on the shoulder kind of guy, right? And a little bit of swagger. And there's something to it that I think we can all attach ourselves to when you see that. And it's kind of the fun, too, that's involved. And sometimes it goes over the line, right? He's planting a flag at Ohio State. Right. Hey, man, that's an artificial turf field. That's not really going to work out for you. Good for you. You had the guts to go out and do it and the whole thing. Yeah. And maybe you get punished, and maybe you're weird at a pregame coin toss with Kansas and the whole thing. Sometimes it goes overboard.
Yeah.
What about guys you've been around, or are there specific guys that you remember from a confidence slash swagger standpoint that really stick out to you as, yeah, those are my guys? Like Brett Favre was my guy. Aaron Rodgers is my guy now. Like he's definitely that guy that will cross the line or can come off as cocky instead of confident. But I love watching that guy play just because there seems to be so much belief. Right. And he's holding guys accountable at a really high level. And he's one of those guys, a lot like Spurrier was as a coach. If you go into a game with him on your team, you feel like you got a chance to win. Who's the guy for you?
Well, before I get into that, I always love to give you good stories when you set me up. So I've got a good Brett Favre story for you.
Fantastic.
So my wife, we moved to Oxford. She gets a job at Oxford is in what most people would call Lafayette, but they pronounce it Lafayette. So she gets a job at Lafayette High School in Oxford. She starts their volleyball team, and within 3 years, they're in the state championship. And they play it the way the state of Mississippi does it, is you play all four teams go to one site. You play basically your upper state, lower state, as we would call it. Then you, an hour or so later, play the championship game. Well, she's fortunate enough to win, I believe it's the upper state, and they're getting ready to play the state championship game, which unknown to her, I wasn't there. I was actually at baseball with something at Ole Miss. She's about to play Brett Favre's daughter's team, and my wife's a huge Brett Favre fan. So in a little psych out mode, Brett Favre comes over, walks into her team huddle, and wishes them all the best of luck. Wanted to say, hey, you've already accomplished a lot. And she, to this day, they lost, blames Brett Favre for mentally getting them just her and her coaches psyched out, because that was 2005-ish. So that was right in his heyday.
Wow.
So, I mean, you can imagine just here's Brett Favre walking into your team huddle right as you're about to play your state championship game. So I always pick on her about that, as his career was kind of winding down. I said he gets what he deserves for doing that to her. But, I loved him. I still can go back and watch when the NFL does all the history of it, just watching him become who he was. I still love that he didn't even know what the nickel defense was. That story to me is, I tell that to our players that, as a story I always used to use, that pay attention in meetings, because a lot of times you can learn something just by listening. In his case, he had to ask a question. But gosh, I try to think back to the players, but you got to think, now, I grew up in an era where end zone dances were popular.
Mm-hmm.
I was a big Mark Gastineau fan because I was a defensive lineman at that time in high school. So I had some good sack dances and those type things. So I've always enjoyed, as I said earlier, I feel like sometimes we make sports, we want to make it real life. It's a sport. The bottom line is it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be for you to enjoy it. I love that part of the game when it was going on. And then the NFL became the no fun league, and you couldn't spike a ball anymore for years. And now imagine if Gronk had played in that era. I mean, you remember the era where you couldn't even spike the balls, a 15-yard penalty and different things. So I've always enjoyed guys that just looked like they were having fun when they were doing it. And, yeah, of course, Brett Favre, gosh, I'm sitting there trying to think. I don't know if any other quarterbacks ever look like he has much fun as that guy. And Baker Mayfield, I think, wanted to be a Brett Favre type guy, maybe just at times wasn't maybe A, as talented, or B, just didn't have those type guys around him to do it when he was trying to do it. But he was always – I enjoyed that part of it.
Well, I don't even know if you can play it quite like Favre did, because he put the ball in jeopardy as much as he did through a bunch of interceptions, and the game has changed so much to where you don't have to do that anymore to succeed. In the NFL standpoint, I think you get away with or the game is called a little bit closer from a defensive pass interference standpoint, and you can be smarter about it and the whole thing. I don't know, man, but I do know that I love watching him play. And I love what you're talking about there too, where the fun is evident. And I think there's something that connects with us too, watching that thing, where we understand a joyous celebration as opposed to a we're rubbing your nose in it situation. Yes. So you being a baseball guy, that translates to the current my 7-year-old got an inflatable bat at a birthday party over the weekend, right? Nice. So he's in the house swinging the inflatable bat, and now he's got, what happens after he's swinging it? The bat flip. He's got that going down. I'm like, whoa. Hey, we gotta talk about that, man. So how does that pertain? You loving celebrations, and then where baseball is right now, especially college baseball, your wheelhouse with the bat flips, with the home runs.
Yeah, again, I've been a part of probably one of the most historic bat flips in Gamecock history with Steve Thomas at Omaha against Clemson. I love the fun of it, but usually the bat flip is more showing up the other pitcher, so I'm not so much into it. That's why I'm let's hit it and run the bases. I'm not a bat flip guy. But I remember that game, and I'm telling you, getting on the bus after beating Clemson, Coach Tanner was as mad as if we had lost, because the one thing he kept saying that day, we're not here to do that. That's not who we are. We're not going to be that group. So when I watch it in college baseball, I'm not a big fan. I watch what Tennessee was trying to do, and I'm just sometimes like, hey, you don't need that. Kind of when Steve did it for us, we may have needed it. We were still trying to get our chip on our shoulder. We felt like we were not getting the respect at that point in Gamecock, history, and we did by beating Clemson again the next day and then going on, obviously to the national championship game and then years later. But no, I'm not a big bat flip guy in that way, but I do love guys that have fun as they hit. I'm fine with you, doing some stuff, but not showing up the other guy. I'm just not into that.
So from a baseball perspective, what I'm hearing from you is the bat flip does cross the line most of the time. I think there are rare exceptions, right? Jose Bautista hits a walk-off home run in Major League Baseball postseason game. He deserves to slam the bat down or whatever. That's a massive moment, right?
Yeah.
These videos that you see with high school kids walking the bat 3/4 the way down first base and then throwing it up about 20 feet in the air, absolutely ridiculous in my mind. What is the appropriate one is you get a base hit, you get a double, you get a triple, whatever it is, you're on the base, you're looking at your dugout, you're hitting those guys going, right? You hit a home run, you make your trot. It doesn't have to be a sprint, right? It can be relatively paced out. You get to the plate, you celebrate with your team, you go to your dugout, you celebrate the whole thing, but it has to be a you thing, right? A your team thing, as opposed to a in your face pointing, I'm showing you up deal.
Yeah, and I think any of us that played any level of athletics, you can tell when somebody's genuinely excited with their team, and you can tell when it's showing people up. I mean, you really can. The Tennessee stuff, what sticks out to me, just a lot of their antics, it just caught up to them. And we all say baseball gods is a big thing in baseball, karma, but I think it just wears you out. It uses energy that no need to do. I'm just more into the fun part of it. I don't know if you've started watching the Captain series with Derek Jeter. I've really enjoyed 4 episodes of it now, and that's something that I've made my son watch, and I think a lot of people need to do. All he talks about this entire thing is about winning. His whole goal in his career was to win, and to think that he was making $750,000 even back then when he was winning. And guys are already making multi-million-dollar contracts, and he wasn't complaining. I think when you put your effort about winning, the game responds back to you, and you can have your fun. I mean, we can all see Kirk Gibson still running around the bases, after the home run. No one thinks he's showing up, the Oakland A's in that. That's pure just happiness and different walk-off hits that we've seen. You can just tell when it's pure energy, pure happiness to win. And then you're right. The halfway down the baseline, you see a high school kid tossing the bat in the air. I don't see how that shouldn't just be an ejection as much as anything else to make them realize that's not part of our game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. Several of you weighing in. Josh saying, we talking Napier spreading rumors there, the Florida recruiting battles right now with the Gamecocks from a football standpoint. Interesting for sure. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit. I try to avoid the spreading rumor conversation. York weighing in says, great day to be a Gamecock. Hey, UFA crew. So this is coming off of the recruiting weekend. And again, we talked about it. Marquis Anderson, the big offensive lineman from Dorman High School, #1 prospect in the state of South Carolina, #2 offensive line prospect the Gamecocks have ever gotten to commit or to sign behind only Brandon Shell, making his commitment yesterday. What'd you think of syrup bottle? What, as far as the announcement, from an offensive lineman, you get working the pancakes there. It's a relatively original. I thought it was pretty good.
I did too. I would love to know who was the brains behind that.
That was his dad, who actually runs a food truck up there. Yeah. I think as the story goes. So they've got the 365 grilling and seafood food truck. They got that worked in, and then he made it yesterday. To me, the important part from the Gamecock standpoint, and I get it right now, Florida is battling, and Josh says, we can keep positive. I think he is for sure worried. I love the pancakes, but the point is you get a big-time offensive lineman in the state of South Carolina, not just in the state, but nationally, but you get him over an LSU, a Clemson, and a North Carolina. Yeah. You've been there, Stuart, and that's kind of the recipe for the Gamecocks' heyday. You make sure you keep the South Carolina guys, and then you put in pieces from there. Seems to also be the Shane Beamer mindset now, and I think Gamecock fans feeling good today because of it.
Yeah, and I think what Coach Beamer's selling is what I've always liked. Come play. There's some kids that just want to go be a part of teams, and they're not obviously too concerned if they're going to get an opportunity to be the guy. I love when guys want to come play. We need guys. We need to keep building this. Obviously, depth is going to be a big thing to the future, and there are going to be a lot of good guys. But right now, we need you. You come here now, you're going to play. And I love guys that want to do that. And then, to me, I guess just being an in-state guy and being a guy that loves where I'm from, why would you not want to play 2 hours from home, or, where everyone can come down? You can only imagine his dad and those guys recruiting weekends when he's going to roll in on a Friday with his food truck, and your family gets to enjoy it. What I always said in recruiting is, these are the same people, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your friends that came to all your high school games. Why would you not want them to be able to come watch you in college? I just think it's cool when a kid can stay within a certain distance of his home. And I'm not a Florida fan, but what are you going to get in Gainesville, 7 hours away from all your family and your grandparents get to see you play once? I mean, to me, that's what I feel like we're selling again is, what don't we have here that you need? You have everything here. Go look at the NFL and look at how many Gamecocks have gone. You can get everywhere you want to be here. And you can then enjoy the rest of your life when your career's over, because as a Gamecock fan, we're going to know you and treat you great forever. So I just love the way I think Coach Beamer and them are selling the fact that come be a part of this. And you saw it in the, Coach Spurrier era, but let's maybe even make it bigger now. So I hope he keeps that role going to it.
Well, Deebo Samuel, the latest example of Gamecocks getting paid in the NFL, 3-year extension, $73.5 million totals with more than 58 guaranteed. And it was messy here in the last several months for sure. But Deebo had the leverage that you would love to have as an NFL guy, especially as a skill guy, where it hadn't happened that much. It hadn't happened at all anywhere close to this level from a financial standpoint. Nuke Hopkins, the only one over the $24 million mark from a wide receiver standpoint in guaranteed money before this year, where 7 other guys have now cashed in. And Deebo, I think, right in the mix there. What he did on the field last year, tremendous. And I know 49ers fans got to feel good about having him as a big-time weapon that now Trey Lance, since they've gone to him and they said, yep, we're moving on from Jimmy G, we're going to you, Trey Lance. You had to do this, I think, in so many ways, and Deebo is the beneficiary big time, man.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome yesterday. I think he, again, is a guy that confused them on how to pay, because he's kind of that does everything. Was still returning kicks at times, punts, running back, receiver. So they try to minimize, but they couldn't. That to me, if they hadn't done that, the 49ers were saying, look, we're not going to compete for the next 2 years at least, for a real playoff run. So I think they had to do that for themselves and their fans to say, we're going to give ourselves a chance to, be a postseason type team, because without him, I don't think they could have been.
So back to the Gamecock recruiting real quick. So up to number 22 in the country, I've seen from a national recruiting rankings. And the big one over the weekend's Marquis Anderson, the offensive lineman from Dorman. You had the Sumter defensive end, Monty Grames. Both of those guys considered 4-star guys. You had another Georgia offensive lineman and Jatavius Shivers commit as well to kind of add more depth. I believe he's considered a 3-star guy, as is a 2024 defensive back from the state of Ohio and Carson Hobbs. You had one decommitment from the state of Florida in Cameron Upshaw, defensive back, and that might be where Josh is kind of referring to. And then I've heard other rumors that Florida's trying to flip a couple other Florida guys that South Carolina has. And then a couple of more 4-star guys, wide receiver from up in Virginia, and then an offensive lineman from a DeMatha High School as well. 4-star guys thought to be Gamecock leans, expected to make their decisions relatively soon. You were talking about the pitch of guys to play. Come on, we need some help in play. So this is a South Carolina program's pitch as opposed to an Alabama pitch, right? Alabama's pitch is you're going to learn to be the best because you're going to compete against the best. And if you practice is going to be more difficult than games and the whole thing, we're going to prepare you for the NFL, and eventually you can work your way onto the field if you're one of the best, as opposed to South Carolina, like, hey, we need you kind of deal. Isn't the pitch, I guess, in your recruiting experience, have you ever talked to a kid who doesn't think he's going to be good enough to get on the field pretty dang quick and he can't compete against the best in the country?
No, I mean, at this level, especially when you're recruiting, they all think they're going to play in the major leagues in baseball, the NFL, and football. You do have to be honest with them, and that's where the transfer portal over the last few weeks I've talked so much with college coaches. Now, how honest is putting them in a spot where, gosh, if I tell them the truth, are they just going to tell me they don't want to be a part of this? Because obviously you're coming in just like defense or offensive lineman. There's only so many going to play at one time. And yes, there's going to be a rotation, but it's kind of in college baseball. Everybody wants to recruit shortstops. Well, last time I checked, only one guy plays shortstop. So are you going to be able to adapt and become a third base, second base, outfielder, which I've seen just guys do that in their career and go on to have great professional careers. But with the portal now, it is kind of the microwave type thing. I want it right now. I want to be the guy. So you've got to be careful in how you tell them maybe what they want to hear, but make sure you're trying to also tell them what they need to hear, because obviously in football, it's really hard to get on the field as a freshman. I mean, that's pretty obvious as we watch the game. They're just not really physically ready, especially in an era where you may be going up against a 23 or 24-year-old man. So I know you're trying to tell them what they want to hear. At the same time, you're trying to also tell them what they need to hear. And baseball is at a time right now, college coaches are really, really worried when the word had come out that it may be multiple transfers allowed and just different things. I've seen it firsthand. I've already mentioned it to you on this show, where that 8th and 9th grader that was committing in baseball, which was stupid anyway, but it's almost immediately gone to the wayside now because of the transfer portal. So I don't know how it'll do in football, but I know in baseball, college baseball, it's made a huge impact quickly. So, yeah, you want them to come on in and play, but again, they hear what they want to hear. And guys that are always so confident that they're the guy. I mean, they're looking at me like, yeah, coach, I know so-and-so was an All-American last year, but boy, I think I'm better. And you're enjoying that too as a coach, going, okay, well, you're going to prove it. We'll prove it on the field. And so it'll be interesting to see how many of the guys in college football, college baseball stay where they originally go now. It's going to be more than ever.
Does that mean that you got to test the temperature? I mean, you gotta have the finger on the pulse if we're going to continue the cliches in so many ways, just from a culture standpoint, because you don't want to have half your team ticked off and 1 foot out the door, halfway through the season or whatever it is. I just feel like you have to have control of the personality of your team, maybe in 2022 from a college athletic standpoint, more than you ever have, just because players have so many more options now. They just can hit the door, and that can be, and I feel like that can be kind of cancerous to teams and their personalities so much.
It certainly can. And this will be the first year really where, you're going to have college players making money. I mean, I wonder how it's going to be when you're so-and-so missed class and you're making them show up at 6 a.m. And does the guy that's making, $1 million name, image, likeness money, he may go, I don't know if I'm coming to that. I think I've said it, and, I started coaching in 1996. This is the most unknown I watch right now from a standpoint of talking to people and seeing probably the most unknown season in my sport of baseball people have ever had. I mean, it's just there are going to be guys on the field, again, making more money than some of the coaches. And look what LSU baseball is doing. I mean, they've still got guys transferring out because they realize that with all the guys they're bringing in, I'm not going to play. It's really a year that I'm interested to see that, what you're saying, locker room dynamic, because it's going to take some strong personality in your coaches to keep everyone feeling like they're treated equal when one guy's getting paid $150,000 to play and you're not getting anything, beside maybe your scholarship. And so in baseball, you're not even on a full scholarship. So, I mean, you're talking about guys that are going to still be going home and their parents trying to figure out how to pay for stuff, where you got some guys on the team making a couple $100,000. It's going to be some super dynamics to keep locker rooms straight.
No doubt about it. DC weighing in says, I'm with Coach Lake, would rather be close to home than moving far away. If you're good enough, any Power 5 school will get you in the league. I guess you got to kind of balance that, right? Because you got different personalities, right? Different kids just want to go away from college and to a certain distance, and then you can definitely sell, especially maybe in baseball when you got 56 games, right? The opportunity for your family to be a part of that. I think the window or the footprint expands. Will Muschamp always talked about is if it's a day trip, you can sell it's a day trip to come to the game on Saturday and still get back to your house that night, as opposed to baseball where you're doing day trips, 5 times a week. That's a different animal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt in football it is. I mean, you're thinking as a football parent, you're coming in most likely on Friday night so that you can be there for the whole day and then back home, or if you want to get up early Saturday morning and do it, there's no doubt in that. College baseball, it was always cool when we could keep them close. They could see midweek games. They could spend the whole weekend, to see things. But I agree with that. But I'm big on – I love kids that want to play at their hometown school. Our home state school. I just always think there's something special to that. And I think the majority want to do that. I know we'll always see that person leave and go play, at Ohio State or leave the North and come south. But I think the majority of guys want to stay within that area because it's cool. You still get to have your friends from home see you play and get to enjoy that. So I think that's still a big part, even though a lot of people may not realize it. And as he said, you can get to the NFL from anywhere. You can get to Major League Baseball from anywhere. That's been proven. If you're good enough, you're going to have your opportunity to get to that level. Take advantage of the level you're on now in college and be a big part of that.
Well, I think the best example of that from the Gamecock standpoint these days is Gigi Jackson on the basketball court, where we really hadn't seen that much. Obviously, Frank Martin did put some guys in the NBA, and it can be done at the University of South Carolina, but not quite at the number one recruit in the country type level that we're seeing with Gigi Jackson. We just have not seen that by and large with Gamecock basketball. What do you make of that situation, especially as a first-year head coach for Lamont Paris coming in and a guy who had been committed to the University of North Carolina, man?
Again, you feel like we didn't get all the information. You feel like there's something must have went on a little bit because growing up here, even North Carolina basketball is a big deal. We get that. And I was lucky enough to be in grad school here when South Carolina basketball is a big deal. And we won the SEC and B.J. Mackey and all those guys. I think it's a case that college basketball presents something no other sport does. You can be here 1 year, right? They still have it where you can do that. So for him, maybe he didn't hear something he liked anymore, or could just been a case that I'm going to let my family enjoy this for a year, because once I do move on to that next level, which you would seem to think he's going to be pretty good at that NBA level, gosh, he might be playing for Sacramento. So, I mean, you may not get to enjoy that year. So it was unique. You never see people decommit from North Carolina basketball, it seems. And then for Coach Paris, I know he had to be – I can't imagine you get your first season, you end up getting one of the best players in the country on top of it. So that's a big recruit for sure.
Right. That's a like Drew Meyer type situation that you guys went through from the Gamecock standpoint. So is it one of those like you celebrate and then you're like, all right, now the real work kind of begins and you better back up that? And how do we make sure that this lives up to what it looks like on paper?
Well, what you hope is Gigi is what Drew Meyer was. Drew Meyer came in and was the ultimate one practice player and two teammate. We all knew in that locker room he was the best player probably on the field, but no one in that locker room ever felt that way, but based on how he worked. He was the hardest worker we had. So if Gigi comes in and sets that tone that, hey, I am, as you always hear the Michael Jordan say, practices were hard, because he got after it so much in practice. If he can do that as a young player, I just think it's going to be a huge success for our basketball program. If he comes in and wants to be treated like the number one recruit in the country and, hey, I'm doing you a favor, then that's going to be a hard fit for all of them to better pull that off.
No doubt. Getting your dog excited there in the background, huh?
Yeah, he likes to do a little knuckle shuffle for me here as we get going in the mornings. He's just getting up, I think.
J-Dub, well, he's up late with you watching wrestling last night.
Yeah,
Pretty clear. Coach Lake might know better, J-Dub says, but wasn't there 2 to 3 guys out of the SoCon that got drafted in the first round of the Major League Baseball draft, along with a guy from Coastal Carolina?
Yeah, I think back just the Citadel guys. I mean, Dallas McPherson was a high draft pick years ago, made it to the big leagues. There's been guys all out of that league. Believe me, scouts, they work. And if you're good enough, you're going to be seen. It's football or baseball, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter now. With the way we all have video and access to watching games, if you're good enough, you're going to get drafted. You're going to prove yourself on that level. But there definitely have been from SoCon before.
Speaking of that, it made me think the big weekend from a recruiting standpoint for the Gamecocks on the football field, and still maybe a couple of more to come, positive momentum continuing. In your recruiting experience, have you ever gone to a recruit? Have you ever gone to a prospect, been around a prospect, and then something happened? You saw something that made you come back to your head coach, especially, or even when you're a head coach at Charleston Southern, and say, "No, I don't think we want to go with this guy anymore." What would that have been if that happened? That kind of dramatically, maybe an attitude thing or a family dynamic deal. Any specific examples of that with names excluded? Obviously,
I have had it. It's happened more than you would realize. What used to be cool is the official visit used to be a big deal. The official visit has unfortunately kind of been pushed to the side now because kids commit so early, they come on unofficial visits, which means the school can't pay for your travel, can't put you in a hotel. You're coming in, on your own dime because of your time of your career. And a lot of times the parents protect you from ever getting to know that player. But in the older days, we would have a guy come in, even with the parents, from a Friday to Sunday. And our players were a big deal because we would put them with players we trusted. We put them with players that we knew would let them have fun, but it wouldn't get overboard. And we really relied. Those players would come back a lot of times. It might be the next day and go, "Hey, this guy's not going to fit in here. He's too much of an eye guy, or he's just not." And then we would kind of put our alarm on to start noticing stuff a little more. And there's been guys at the end of weekends that, I've been here, Ole Miss, Charleston Southern, I don't think it's a fit. And it wasn't because they, quote, got arrested or got in trouble. It was just we really got to know their personality in that 24 to 48 hours that unfortunately doesn't even hardly happen anymore. You look at it now, most big-time baseball programs, you have one official visit weekend. And all your kids come in, whether it be 10, 12, 15 kids, they're going to sign with you. And they're all together. Their parents are there. And you never really get to know them. And then it gets you the next year when they're rooming with someone and they go, "Coach, I can't room with him." I have. I've certainly seen it. And I've seen guys come in the other way that we were kind of lukewarm on. Like, let's bring him in, but I don't know. I'm not really sold. By the time you were done that weekend with his makeup and that personality, you were ready to offer more money to make sure you got him. I tell Zach Cozart was a kid I recruited at Ole Miss, and we bring him in for his official visit weekend, and I give the wrong name of a high school to our manager. So on the big board back then, you could put, Zach Cozart, so-and-so high school. You can't do that anymore. As we're walking across the field in Oxford, his dad says to me, that ain't right school. Well, you can imagine your heart just goes, "Oh my God." And I look up and I realize I have put Germantown High School where he was from, like Collierville High School. And that's their rival. Oh, before I could even say anything, Zach Cozart said one of the coolest lines I ever heard in recruiting. It's why he went on to be such a great player. "Hey, no big deal, Dad. I'm not coming here to play for Germantown or Collierville. I'm coming here to be an Ole Miss Rebel." So it just made me go, "Oh, God, I hope I don't lose him because I put the wrong high school up." We were recruiting him against Clemson, by the way. I don't know if anybody ever knew that, a grade of players that, as it turned out. And they got me. They said I did dirty recruiting. Cozart committed to us. And I'll never forget, Coach Bianco called me in the office, and he said, hey, Coach Leggett just called me from Clemson. Those guys are pretty mad at you. I said, what did I do to them? So they've heard we did dirty recruiting in the Cozart thing. I haven't done anything. I've recruited Zach Cozart. So, well, they said you told him that Clemson's a long way from Collierville, Tennessee. I said, no. I told him Clemson's further away from Collierville, Tennessee than Oxford. I never told him anything more than that. It was 6 hours of Clemson. He lived an hour from us. I said, I think you want your family to see you play, this is where you need to go. So if that's the dirtiest I ever can be accused of recruiting, I'll take that one. But that was a guy in Cozart we thought was going to be a good player. And by the end of his weekend, we knew he was going to be a star. I mean, me and Dan McDonald were like, this guy is going to be that rare guy like a Drew Meyer who can start at shortstop as a freshman in the SEC. And we knew talent-wise he could do it. Then we figured out personality, makeup. I mean, he had teammates just love him already by the end of that weekend.
Good stuff there, man. The dirty recruiting comment, that leads to an obvious question from me. So that's how it works in baseball? Like the head coaches call each other and say, stop doing this, stop doing that, or we heard this, we heard that?
Oh, yeah. It's gone on for years. It still goes on where you'll do it. Very rarely, I'll be honest, nobody I've ever worked for did it. We just always – really from – even Coach Kingston, Coach Tanner, all that, we never called him. Right? We figured whatever that kid decided. But have I been at places where people have called? Oh, yeah. And that was the case that years later I picked on Coach Leggett about it. I said, hey, why didn't you just call me? And he goes, I shouldn't have made that call. That was, I got wrapped up with my recruiting. His coaches, I forget who was there with him at that time. He goes, I'm embarrassed I made that call. And I said, no big deal. I said, I certainly never talked dirty about you or your program. He goes, no one ever accused that. All you did was tell him we were further away. And when I kind of hung the phone up, I realized how stupid I probably sounded to your coach. And I hate you got called in. I said, didn't bother me. I said that I wanted him to know that was fighting for our program. No big deal. But yeah, it happened. We've had it. I've had it happen different times for sure.
Geography. It sounds like you just pointed out geography to me.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
To me, that wasn't that big a deal, but that's one that always stuck out in my mind. And in fact, I would make jokes with recruits later that, hey, don't want to get in trouble. So whoever's recruiting you, I Google this. So you're 6 hours away here and 30 minutes from there. So,
right.
And it was fun too. I got to, during my career, I loved listening to, I was at Ole Miss with Ed Ogeron, and I used to love hearing off the record his recruiting stories of the things they did, and it wasn't illegal stuff. It was just how he was so passionate about where he was coaching, and I just loved hearing those stories from those guys in recruiting.
So, were you surprised how it went down at LSU with him? I got to ask that.
Yeah, I mean, could you draw up a guy he was like the mascot. I mean, just to be the Louisiana guy and to have seen it, like I did firsthand when he first came back from Southern Cal to Ole Miss, and then you saw him go kind of fight his way back and then to do what they did at LSU. And yeah, I was surprised, but, he's a character. Is he at Miami now? Did I see that as an assistant?
I think that's right. I'll look it up and confirm that thing. I think he got paid a bunch of money. I know that. So I think he might have even taken last year off. But I'll check.
So too. And, I always love to tie back to wrestling. The Rock gives him credit for all of his lines that he uses is from Coach Ogeron as his defensive line coach at Miami. So I got to ask him a few times some, Dwayne The Rock Johnson stories, and it was funny to hear him tell them from that side of view of how he kind of made him a tougher guy, as he would like to say.
So still out of coaching right now and no plans to coach in 2022 is the word for Ed Ogeron. Right? Okay. Financially, he's in good shape. And, man, I can't imagine because that's he was a recruiter, right? I mean, that's what he kind of built his reputation on, offensive line / recruiting, but mostly being a big-time recruiter. And then the fall was so quick and ugly and all of that, man. I would imagine you take a little time, lick your wounds, and I'm sure he'll be back at it at some point. And he's just great for college football. I mean, to me, he might be, if I had to give you one example of why do you love college football? If you had to pick a coach, boom, I think I'd throw him up there. And I think, and Shane Beamer has that too, but in a much different kind of way. And we were talking about guys who just play with a certain joy and love the game. There are coaches who do that too, man. And you can see it on the sideline. You can't hide that. And then there are coaches on the other side who come at it from a different way. Like if they're not getting their way, they're going to throw a tantrum and everybody's going to see it. And those are the ones that I put in a different category. Like, hey, I got no problem with those guys losing. I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I do too. But no, there's no doubt. There's nothing better than when they get him right before kickoff and you got a good go Tigers. You were kind of waiting there as a college football fan to hear that and his passion to it. And he certainly had it. And I think that's what we enjoy it. That's why I get excited when they say it's 4 weeks till college football. Just the whole weekend of it is so exciting. And guys like him are a big part of it for sure.
And we're getting close, and now you got a quarterback for 10 games or 11 games, I guess, now in the NFL with the 6-game suspension announced for Deshaun Watson, or reported by Adam Schefter anyway. You got your Browns hat representing today. So I think it sounded to me like you're relatively pleased from just obviously the football part of this thing, that it's 6 games, a resolution has happened, and now hopefully you can move forward with your quarterback and your organization and try to get back on track. I don't know if first time since the 80s the Browns could get back on track. That sound about right?
Yeah, it sounds about right. Since about Bernie Kosar, but I am, as you and I've said, we've tried to use as much tact as we can. We would assume all the legal facts are in, and if that's what it is, I hope we can move on now and see what we can do football wise. But I think we do. I know as a Browns fan, I think we have a good team, so I hope he can be healthy, but also as a guy now that wouldn't have played for 23 games because he didn't play at all last year in the first 6 here. I wonder, Tim, can you play in preseason games if you can't play in the first 6 games?
Yep, I think that's happened. I think Tom Brady might have done that for that suspension back in the day, is where that's coming from. Or I forget who else I might be thinking about that I know has done that before. So I'm pretty positive this would just be a regular season deal.
Yeah, I don't have my calendar in front of me, but I know the Browns play, I think it's the Bengals on Halloween. So you're starting to think that 6 weeks is going to kind of fall right around that time for a Monday night football game. So it'll be exciting when he does come by. I hope it's in Cleveland when it's that 7th game. I'd have to look at their schedule and see where it is.
And we'll give Troy, the resident Clemson fan, the last word on Deshaun Watson today. His punishment is more than 6 games. Because he'll never again be looked at as a nice All-American guy. There's definitely that, man.
No doubt.
Yeah. Hey, glad that we can move on into the football part of this, and we're going to be doing that, man. The next times we have you on, we'll be that much closer to football season and the whole deal. Love the recruiting stories today. Anytime you can say you heard Ed Orgeron off the record stories, that is fantastic. You can't say that without gritting, I'm guessing.
No, that's I'll give you one quick story and then go. If you go back, you can find it. Ed Orgeron came to his original press conference and he had a bag on his shoulder. I'll never forget. And a reporter just finally, after 10 minutes, said, "Coach, can I ask you what you got in that bag?" And he immediately quit, "No." And from that point on, you just knew anytime I had a chance, and I'd have to tell you the off the record stories off the air. He had some incredible. I had him come in one time and speak to our team at Ole Miss before we played UCLA in a 3-game series in LA. And if it would have been videoed, it'd be one of the funniest things you've ever heard. Because to say maybe I don't like Clemson as a Gamecock fan would be an understatement of how he hated UCLA as a Southern Cal guy. So our players were – I still have guys to the day say thank you for having him speak to us, because it was one of the most bizarre 15, 20-minute speeches you'll ever hear in your life. And we went out and won 2 out of 3, I think, at UCLA. But, oh, my goodness, he had some incredible stories. So we may just do a Coach O show one day on here with you.
Can't wait. We'll have to put in a call, see if we can get him to join, because he's at that place in life, man. He can let things go a lot more than others.
Yeah, he would steal the show if he did. I'd just sit back and watch that.
Fantastic. Stuart Lake, appreciate the time as always, man. And congratulations from a Browns fan perspective on getting to the other side of this thing and still being a loyal fan. Much respect to you.
Well, I appreciate it. And can't wait till next time we talk.
All right. Stuart Lake, ladies and gentlemen, at Stuart_Lake, where you can follow him on Twitter. Always enjoy having him on the program for so many different reasons, but especially having been in those recruiting battles, been in those offices, getting called out, getting a call from Jack Leggett to get complaining about dirty recruiting is a great example of that. Hey, I'm going to reset where we are today. The Gamecocks' big football recruiting weekend, NFL news, everything with where we sit today. We'll do that in just a sec. First, wanted to take a quick break, let you see, and this kind of goes into that, right? We just had the first round NFL draft pick from the University of South Carolina in Rick Sanford on Friday. Rick was tremendous. He was on for a long time. If you want to see the complete segment, he was on for about an hour, I think, last Friday. Just click on that show. You can do it on the podcast platforms or on the YouTube page and check out all of his comments. But this specific clip kind of sums up his optimism about South Carolina football specifically. Let you hear this real quick and know that you can go and check out a segment. I got about a 10-minute, I think, segment just talking about the Gamecocks in 2022, but his entire appearance talking about his experience with health issues related to football and where that leads him to perceive football today, and then the Carolina Clemson stuff, Shane Beamer, Spencer Rattler, all of that deal. It was tremendous from Friday. So that episode, again, on the YouTube page, or you can go back and listen to it from the podcast versions as well on any of the podcast platforms. Here's more from Rick Sanford from last Friday.
I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do. I think, this team, and I've said this to other people, I think South Carolina, this is going to be a much more competitive game with Clemson this year. I'll be very, very surprised if Clemson runs away with this game against South Carolina. I think the talent level's getting better at South Carolina, and when you've got a quarterback that can play, you've got a chance. And I think that's the one thing that Spencer offers them. And this might be the first year in a long, long time that I think South Carolina's quarterback is better than Clemson's.
Sanford from Friday's show. Really appreciate his time. Appreciate Stuart Lake's time today, and wanted to let you know a little bit about our sponsors. Got a large announcement coming up from a sponsorship standpoint imminently, let's say. But today, telling you about Freedom Primary Care. Freedom Primary Care is who I trust now to care for my family, and for so many different ways. First of all, because of the name in Freedom Primary Care means they're giving you the freedom to make your own choices in healthcare. Never thought that would be an issue. Clearly that is, as we sit here on August 1st, 2022. But what Freedom Primary Care will do, not only are they giving you the freedom to make your choices, the line that I love is they're responsible to you, not for you. So if you are more naturally minded, they'll set you up and set you on a path to care that way. If you're more traditional minded, they can give you that path of care as well. I wanted to show you a little bit from their website as we sit here right now. We'll pop up their website, what we can do here on the program as well. I got it right here. Just takes a button or two click from the video portion. You see Freedom Primary Care. If you go to holisticcharlotte.com and then /Freedom Primary Care, they're defining it for you, right? You are in control of your health, aiming to educate and empower you, not force medical choices upon you or your children. That is more important to me now with my children, with what I went through at my former job than it ever has been before. Again, never thought we would be here, but here we are. And this is one way that you can pivot. I've pivoted for sure, and Freedom Primary Care will help you handle whatever health issues you might have. Go check them out. You can give them a call at 803-627-2447. And again, the website is holisticcharlotte.com Freedom Primary Care located up in Fort Mill, South Carolina, but plenty of telemedicine options as well. That's Freedom Primary Care. Please support those who support the program. We really appreciate your support. Appreciate you being part of this live stream right now. And on a Monday morning after a big recruiting weekend, we need to break that down to a certain degree here, with the Gamecocks popping in the top 25 in national recruiting rankings. So a heck of a run from 37, 38-ish is where Carolina was not too long ago. In the last few weeks, they have made a run up the national rankings, and doing it kind of from the inside out is how I see it anyway. When yesterday, the big announcement was from up in the upstate, Dorman offensive lineman Marquis Anderson choosing the syrup bottle that had the Gamecock logo on it instead of the LSU one, instead of the Clemson one, instead of the North Carolina one. Those were his finalists. That's how he set it up. His dad, who owns a food truck up there, the 365 Grilling and Seafood Truck in Spartanburg, said, yeah, you're an offensive lineman. Let's get the pancake theme going. Dorman does not track officially, I think, the pancake blocks, or they didn't put out any numbers that Anderson had, but he is the highest rated prospect now in the class of 2023 for South Carolina football. He is the second highest rated offensive lineman ever from a South Carolina standpoint, Brandon Shell being the highest rated guy ever, and a massive piece, not just physically. I'll give you his numbers physically. Marquis Anderson is 6'4.5", 305 pounds. Not a small guy, as you would expect from an offensive lineman commit at South Carolina. So you got that on the offensive side of the ball happening Sunday. I believe it was Friday or Saturday, I forget. It's a long, big weekend of recruiting. Monteek Rames making the original wave and making Gamecock fans happy. The Sumter defensive end, 4-star guy as well, really highly thought of too. I think he might be second in the state behind Anderson from the recruiting ranking standpoint. So you get an offensive lineman and a defensive end guy. And Rames is a guy who is highly thought of, and much more highly thought of than anybody else from the defensive end standpoint that has been in a recruiting class from South Carolina in the last couple of years. So you got those two 4-star guys. You also had another offensive lineman from the state of Georgia, and Jatavius Shivers, helped with the depth for sure, and joined the class of 2023. You had a 2024 commit, an Ohio defensive back, Carson Hobbs. He's just the second guy for not this season, but the next recruiting cycle that Shane Beamer and company are already well into. And Hobbs himself saying he hopes to establish a bit of a pipeline from Ohio to South Carolina. Will be interesting to keep tabs on that. One Florida defensive back has decommitted from South Carolina in Cameron Upshaw. Florida, by the way, making waves in recruiting over the weekend, and they've signed a bunch of 4-star guys. They're up to number 12 or 13 in the country. And Josh hit us up about, I guess there is the word out there that Billy Napier's saying some stuff about the Gamecocks, and I have seen where Florida's still recruiting a couple of South Carolina commits hard and trying to flip those guys, just like South Carolina does, and every other major college football program continues to recruit other guys and tries to flip them up until the final minute. The one thing to keep an eye on, or the major thing to keep an eye on now for Gamecock football recruiting, is a couple of more 4-star guys that I think, if you are really into recruiting, you thought might happen this past weekend, where decision dates were set and then they were pushed back by a couple of 4-star guys. One of those in Carmelo Taylor, the wide receiver from up in Roanoke, Virginia. And then an offensive lineman from DeMatha High School right outside the D.C. area where Marshawn Lloyd played. And his name is difficult to pronounce. And I will go with his nickname of being Tree there. You guys have probably seen that if you're following anything close from a Gamecock football standpoint on social media. But those decisions pushed back, I think expected maybe this week before the high school football season really gets cranked up. But Gamecock football thought to be really well off with these guys and strong leans to the Gamecocks. So if you get a couple of more 4-star guys, you're able to hold on to the guys you already got, which will be part of it. That's where Gamecock football recruiting lies as we sit here today. And again, up to 22 in the country. I think that's 7th in the SEC. You get a couple of more 4-star guys. I would imagine those spots continue to improve. And it's what you got to have. I mean, Will Muschamp is a great example that even if you do recruit really well, top 25 consistently, that doesn't guarantee anything. You still got to develop guys. You still got to make sure that the culture is what it needs to be and everybody's pulling in the same direction and doing what they need to do and the whole thing. But especially with where we sit here today, with Oklahoma and Texas soon to join the SEC, being nationally relevant in recruiting is not something that can be looked upon as like a bonus for the South Carolina football coach. It is a requirement in a big way. And I don't know if it's ever been required as much as it is right now, with Georgia and Clemson doing what they've been doing in recruiting for the last, fill in the blanks now, right? At least 5 years, longer. You have to be in the top 25 from where I sit to give yourself a chance. And it's that chicken and egg thing too. Never forget being in a post-game press conference. I think it was after a Carolina Clemson game. Might have been the streak started in 2009 in Columbia, if I'm not mistaken, where CJ Spiller returned a kick that day early on, but the Gamecocks came back and won it. I think that was the year before. I think that was when Stephon Gilmore played the Wildcat quarterback, threw one up to Deshaun Jeffrey. I'm pretty sure Alshon Jeffrey. That was 2009. So I'm thinking this would have been the previous time those two played in Columbia in 2007. And I'm pretty sure it was after that game where Steve Spurrier came in and was like, yeah, we're just going to have to win more games, get better players in here. We got to get better players. We got to win more games. I'm pretty sure that was the post-game press conference. I know he said it after a difficult loss, and he was ticked. And at that point, I was wondering, all right, is this ever going to get going for Steve Spurrier? Because it was difficult, man. It didn't happen instantly. Like, there were some things that happened. Beating Tennessee in that first year, first time ever in Knoxville, beating Florida at home. It was an instant improvement, no doubt. But it wasn't to the level that I thought it would be, and I think maybe even Spurrier thought it would be. That offense wasn't the cock and fire, fun and gun Florida version immediately at South Carolina, because there weren't enough players. There weren't enough weapons. And you can be as good a coach as you want to be. You can be at the best coach ever, but those really good coaches are usually the first to admit you got to have players. And Steve Spurrier had kind of come back to South Carolina at that point, a much more humbled coach, because he went to the NFL and did not have near the success that he was used to. He realized, I think he came back and said it almost verbatim in his introductory press conference, he realized that all coaches coach really hard, and a lot of coaches are good at what they do. And that doesn't mean just because that he came in and looked at things a certain way, that it didn't equate to instant success. And also realize that in the NFL, it has a lot to do with your management and your owner and how that works out. And the Daniel Snyder combo of Snyder and Spurrier obviously wasn't a legendary combo and a difficult one to overcome from Spurrier's perspective. But from Shane Beamer's, how he sits, where he sits. Again, I'm not a recruiting is everything, and I look at it every single day, and the drama of he said this, and this player is leaning one way or the other, and because of this and that, and to me that's all too much. But there is a reason that I think it's the last national champions for maybe decade plus. One of their 4 classes at least has been in a top 5 national ranking. That is not a coincidence. You got to have guys. You got to have the studs. And you got to have the difference makers, right? You got to have a foundation of really good players, and then you got to hit on the difference maker type guys, the Alshon Jeffries, the Jadeveon Clowneys. Then maybe you can develop a guy like Connor Shaw You can develop a guy like Melvin Ingram into what they eventually became, but you also got to get those top level guys, and you gotta have a lot more hits than you have misses. It's a little different now than it used to be. And in my opinion, when you're Shane Beamer, I do think it is easier to a certain extent, because like Stuart Lake talked about, playing time. Guys want to come play. And if you are taking over a program that just won 2 games, they know you need help. So you can go immediately to the transfer portal and say, hey, Spencer Rattler, I get it. That Oklahoma situation turned toxic, and that was rough, man. What do you think about coming to play in the SEC for a guy who you know and trust, for an offensive coordinator who's got a bunch to prove as well, at a program that you can be an instant hero if you play anywhere close to what you were projected to play like just a year ago? So from that standpoint, in 2022, at South Carolina specifically, where clearly name, image, and likeness isn't a deterrent, if anything, that has been an advantage for South Carolina. Football, if Spencer Rattler came, I know they say publicly that it's not, but also I think he's, maybe over the weekend, he was at a car dealership signing autographs, or we know there are deals in place. And then what we just saw with South Carolina basketball and Gigi Jackson decommitting from North Carolina to come to South Carolina. Obviously, name, image, and likeness, those 3 letters, not a deterrent for guys to come to the University of South Carolina. So you got to get guys like Shane Beamer just got over the weekend, and then you got to hold on to them. Number 1 prospects in the state, big-time offensive lineman in Marquis Anderson, big-time defensive end in Sumter and Monteque Rames. Check, right? And if Shane Beamer hadn't done that, I think then the positive momentum that the fan base has behind him and that you saw last year, you start to wonder, wait a second, how does this thing keep going, right? How do you not do that? You got to do those kind of things, and he did. Massive. So then you can keep building momentum, and you keep telling guys who are already committed to you at Florida, no, what we have going here, it just is continuing, and you're going to be a big part of it. And yeah, Billy Napier in Florida, they really want you because they know we're a threat, right? They know that you can beat them. And we were the ones who valued you more earlier on in the process, I'm guessing, as part of the sales pitch. We figured that out way before they did. They're late to the party. Loyalty is something. Doesn't that mean something to you? It means something to us. And this is, you can make a name for yourself here like so many guys have done from the state of Florida to South Carolina. Then you got the South Carolina pitch, right? Which is the easier one in a lot of ways, and yet puts more pressure on you to get a guy like Marquis Anderson from up in Dorman, to get a guy like Monteque Rames, which just happened. And now it's a couple of out-of-state guys from that DMV area that Shane Beamer talks about, where the Beamer name from Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech just automatically hits and means something with a guy from DeMatha High School and a big offensive lineman. Babalade, I think is how we pronounce his last name. Babalade. It's tough. It's tough. He goes by Tree, right? Then you got a receiver from down in Roanoke, Virginia. That certainly, I'm sure, the Virginia Tech name and Frank Beamer's legacy means a lot. You got those 2 4-star guys where you seem to be in good shape with, that could join the mix in the class of 2023 and send that national ranking from 22 up a few spots more. And again, it's where you got to be just to give yourself a chance to be competitive. Give yourself a chance to improve from 7-6 last year. And I know these guys won't be on the field immediately this year. I'm just saying moving forward. And then you have the opportunity of the transfer portal. And who knows what that'll look like this time next year, right? Because if you thought that Spencer Rattler was going to come via the transfer portal to Shane Beamer in year number 2, you told me that this time last year. Crazy. Absolutely crazy in so many ways. Like, get out of here. Yeah, well, why don't you just tell me that South Carolina's going to win the national championship too? But it happened. And that's the weird part of the atmosphere that we're in, what college sports has become in a lot of ways, that I don't know what you can rule out. And Roger, going back to the days of Woodruff High School, where Tony Rice ended up going to Notre Dame for Lou Holtz, where Clemson went after him hard, and Tony Rice led Notre Dame and Holtz to the national championships. A lot of Clemson fans ticked and said that Carolina didn't recruit Rice, which I don't know if that's true, but maybe just didn't get in there quickly enough or hard enough. As a Carolina fan, I hated that at the time, but it worked out well for him because he'd never beat out Todd Ellis. Carolina said he'd be a good DB. Well, there's that. I guess you can come to that conclusion too about some quarterback prospects, and clearly that wasn't the case. Tony Rice, great college quarterback, one of the first that I really remember. That was the time where Notre Dame was just a completely separate entity. I get they're different, and man, good for Marcus Freeman and that uniform reveal video they did, the kind of the tribute to The Hangover. Fantastic. Maybe he can get them in a different place than they've been. I mean, they've still been nationally relevant. Brian Kelly knows how to win football games. You got to give him credit for that. What he doesn't know how to do, or what he didn't figure out how to do at Notre Dame, was to win the big football games, right? Get to the college football playoff finals. I don't think, anyway. They got there, but then so many times I felt like through the years Notre Dame got themselves in position to prove that they could play with the best teams, usually Alabama or someone else from SEC, maybe even Clemson back in the day, and couldn't quite get over the hurdle. Couldn't quite clear that one. And then who knows with where we are with the alignment thing, where Notre Dame is going to be. Are they going to stay out on their own? Is the Big Ten finally going to be able to convince them? Is the SEC making a play for them kind of behind closed doors that we don't know about? Could any other, Pac-10-ish, Big 12, could they make some kind of miracle run at that we don't see coming for Notre Dame? Would make zero sense from the outside looking in, right? And then, we haven't even touched on the Pac-12 commissioner going strong last Friday after our show ended. I think it was right as the show was ending. I think the press conference out there talking about the Big 12 being open for business, and him saying that I'm not sure we're going to go shopping. So that was fascinating, wasn't it? How the Big Ten going in and pillaging the Pac-12 at the time. Now, the result of UCLA and Southern Cal going to the Big Ten wasn't the Pac-12 commissioner going after the Big Ten. It was them going after the Big 12, which is, I translate as that's the threat right now, right? Not the Big Ten coming in and taking Washington or Stanford or who's the other one, Oregon up there, right? But it's how aggressive maybe the Big 12 has been behind closed doors, maybe trying to pick off a Colorado or Arizona State, and then how that would pretty much just blow up what is left of the Pac-12 now. So it's kind of picking the battles, right? Clearly, the Pac-12-ish can't compete with the Big Ten right now, and the Big Ten already stole the big boys. So now it's a matter of, all right, we're not going to pick on the bully. We're going to pick on somebody our own size that is a serious threat right now. And that's what happened on Friday, just the latest in the conference shenanigans that we've seen here in the offseason. But got to that from the Notre Dame angle that Roger's talking about. Said Holtz had a short stint in the NFL, but he struggled like Spurrier did. Pete Carroll, one of the few that made it in the NFL. Yeah, he didn't at first, though. but he didn't have the college reputation either. So Carroll failed at New England Patriots, goes back to Southern Cal, obviously dominates, tremendous run with NCAA issues at the end, and then on to the Seattle Seahawks, where he's been seemingly forever now from an NFL standpoint. And it was the New York Jets, which is one of the most embarrassing head coaching tenures in NFL history that Lou Holtz had. And I guess Urban Meyer might have just put himself above that one with his reputation, everything that was that Jacksonville Jaguars meltdown. At least Lou Holtz didn't have a video from his restaurant, right? That mess. Josh Allen's comment recently at training camp. Yeah, there is a difference. We're being treated like professionals now in the locker room. Yeah, Saban struggled too. Yeah, the Dolphins making a big lineman cry is the classic scene that I remember from Nick Saban, and then saying no, he wasn't going to be the coach of Alabama. See how that turned out. Speaking of NFL news, Deebo Samuel gets paid massively. 3 years, $73.5 million, $58.1 guaranteed. He was in a great spot to maximize his leverage with the 49ers. Not only did he have a great season, right? We've seen wide receivers have great seasons before. We haven't quite seen it, though, how Deebo did it with 8 rushing touchdowns, 1,400 receiving yards, 300 rushing yards. I think the first time that's ever happened. 18.1 yards per catch, I think is the number. And doing it in the postseason as well. I mean, clearly being a tremendous percentage of the offensive production. A guy, Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't know what he could have done without him. And now that they moved on from Garoppolo to Trey Lance, you got that timing combined with other wide receivers in the league doing things contract-wise that just hadn't been done before. Nuke Hopkins, the only guy to go above $24 million guaranteed money before this year, and now Deebo Samuel becomes the 7th guy, 7th wide receiver to get massive guaranteed money. So good for him. It wasn't pretty. It looked like I was afraid we were going down a path that I'd seen way too many times before. Never quite from the Gamecock perspective, I don't think, a former Gamecock perspective of just things turning ugly negotiation-wise, professionally, and holdouts. And there was that scene, social media-wise, there was a kid at Deebo's camp where trying to sign an autograph, and he turned away from him. And that wasn't a good look PR-wise. And I know Deebo came out and said, well, that was just the way that it was at the camp, right? There were a bunch of kids. The rule was everybody gets something signed, but it's going to be the same thing. And so you can't make exceptions for everybody in the whole thing. But you could see the PR thing swing in the 49ers way in a lot of ways. So happy for Deebo for sure. Pleased for the 49ers. Anthony's pumped about his Niners. Ready for the QB change. Well, Trey Lance is a guy that you can get excited about, right? A great story. Best buddies with Zeb Nolan randomly, right? Since Nolan transferred from Iowa State to North Dakota State and got beat out by Trey Lance, but says great guy. He's told me we were playing golf at the Birdies with Beamer thing last year, just told me how good buddies they are. And it seemed very genuine, right? That they talk nearly every day. And it just seemed like they have that kind of relationship. And now Lance, because of where he was drafted, his talent, and now his development, the 49ers making the move to him. And you can't do that without your main weapon on offense. You just can't. And so that money seemingly very well invested if Deebo Samuel can continue to be the guy that he was last year. And I mean, a guy that I don't know if we've seen it like that in the NFL. You know, Steve Spurrier always used to tell us about Deebo Samuel's talent, and we never got to see it early on in his Carolina career because of injuries. And then to see him finally burst on the scene, that kickoff return against NC State to start the season. Is that Will Muschamp's second year, I believe? That 9-4 season? No, that was his third year, right? I think. I don't know. I forget. Because he had the one-handed catch that game too. I think that was the second year. And then it was his next season going to the NFL. I'm not sure. It might have been his last year. They might have started the season there at Bank of America and ended it, sitting out the Belk Bowl against Virginia. It's all a blur. But we never saw him dominate college football like he's dominated in the NFL, which is rare, right? But always talking about how he kind of had the lower body of a running back. But we haven't seen, I can't remember another NFL wide receiver who has done it like Deebo has done it, where they'll line him up at running back and let him go, man. I think they do that a little bit with Cordero Patterson, another South Carolina guy, Rock Hill guy. Now with the Falcons. He's got some handoffs. I mean, you rarely even see that in college, right? I know Savell Newton did it for the Gamecocks and also throwing the quarterback stuff. So you've seen some of that before, but never quite like this. Roger peacing out on us. Have a good day as well. Appreciate it, Roger. Appreciate all the contributions into the show. So a great day for Deebo Samuel, who has cashed in with the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, Percy Harvin. Great one, Anthony. A little bit with Percy Harvin. That's the best comp for sure. But he's a guy who dominated college football, and that never quite translated to the NFL. I don't think the numbers that Harvin had, I don't think he had a season like Deebo had last year. And certainly I don't remember him doing it in the postseason like Deebo has done. And I think that earned him that contract. And watching him struggle with injuries in college makes me that much more thankful for he and his family now that guaranteed money, that we're in that era of the NFL where you can get guaranteed money like that, as opposed to have an injury. You'd be one injury away from missing out on a tremendous value. But just to recap the main focus of the program from the Gamecock football standpoint, and we're in August now, just a few days away from Friday's report date and really getting preseason camp going and cranking this thing up, getting some consistent comments out of coaches and players, and looking forward to building the momentum for sure towards football season. But a couple of four-star guys in Marquis Anderson, the offensive line from Dorman, Monteque Rames, the defensive end from Sumter, verbally committing to the Gamecocks over the weekend, helping those numbers shoot up. Also got another offensive lineman from the state of Georgia, got an Ohio defensive back for the class of 2024, was one decommitment in the mix from a Florida defensive back in Cameron Upshaw. Then you got a couple of more four-star guys seemingly on the verge of signing with Carolina coming up soon. So that's the recruiting update there. And we'll certainly keep you up to date on that in the way that we do it on this show, in that we're not going to put too much emphasis on it from a day-to-day basis, but when it is making headlines, then we'll let you know about it. DC with a peace out, and Anthony as well. Appreciate it. Be great today, people, is a great way to end it. Thank you guys for being a part of this show as always. Please comment, like, subscribe, and all that stuff will help spread the word. That'll do it for the August 1st edition of Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent.